The text of Mr. Spurgeon's first sermon at Waterbeach was Matthew chapter 1 verse 21. This passage was also the subject of his last sermon as pastor there, and of his first sermon as pastor at New Park Street, though a different discourse was delivered on each occasion. It is delightful to notice that Jesus was the keynote of his ministry both in Waterbeach and in London, and that not one of his many thousands of sermons was out of harmony with that opening note. The following is the outline of the first sermon at Waterbeach. Outline 33. Salvation from sin. Thou shalt call his name Jesus, for he shall save his people from their sins. Matthew chapter 1 verse 21. The two parts of this salvation are justification and sanctification. Firstly, justification, including pardon and imputation of righteousness. Number 1, pardon. Free, perfect, instantaneous, irreversible, bringing with it deliverance from the consequences of sin, which are God's just displeasure, the curse of the law, incapacity for heaven, liability, yea, certain destination to eternal punishment. Number 2, imputation of righteousness, causing a man to be regarded as holy, sinless, worthy of commendation and reward. Its accompaniments are God's love, blessing of the law, capacity for heaven, a right and title, yea, certain possession of heaven. This Jesus effected, as to the first, by his sufferings and death, as to the second, by his obedience to the law. Secondly, sanctification, including deliverance from sin and positive holiness. Number 1, victory over 1, our natural depravity. 2, the habits of sin. 3, temptations. 4, backslidings. Number 2, working in us all holy affections. 1, holy nature. 2, holy habits. 3, desires for holiness. 4, progress in divine grace. Sanctification is unlike justification in that it is gradual, imperfect, progressional, never consummated, but in heaven. This is the work of Jesus. Number 1, by showing us his example and commands. 2, by the Holy Spirit. This is the beauteous salvation Jesus gives, complete deliverance from the guilt, consequences, and effects of sin, the choicest happiness which a mortal can know is that of doing good to a fellow creature. To save a body from death almost gives us heaven upon earth. Some men boast that they have sent many souls to perdition, that they have hurled a great number of their fellows out of the world. We meet now and then, a soldier who glories that in battle he struck down many foemen, that his swift and cruel sword reached the heart of a host of his enemies. But I count not that glory. If I thought I had been the means of the death of a single individual, I should scarcely rest at night, for the spirit of that murdered wretch would ever seem to be staring at me. I should remember that I had slain him, and perhaps sent his soul unshriven and unwashed into the presence of his Maker. To me, it is wonderful that men can be found to be soldiers. I say not if it be right or wrong, still I marvel that they can follow such an occupation. I know not how, after a battle, they can wash the blood from their hands, wipe their swords, and put them by, and then lie down to slumber, and their dreams be undisturbed. If I were in their place, the tears would fall hot and scalding on my cheek at night, and the shrieks of the dying and the groans of those approaching eternity would torture mine ear. I cannot imagine how others can endure it. To me, it would be the very portal of hell if I knew that I had been a destroyer of my fellow creatures. But what bliss it is to be the instrument of saving bodies from death. Those monks on Mount St. Bernard surely must feel happiness when they rescue men from death. The dog comes to the door, and they know what he means. He has discovered some poor, weary traveller who has lain down to sleep in the snow, and is dying from cold and exhaustion. Up rise the monks from their cheerful fire, intent to act the Good Samaritan to the lost one. As they see him, they speak to him, but he answers not. They try to discover if there is breath in his body, and they fear he is dead. They take him up and give him remedies. Hastening to their hostel, they lay him by the fire and warm and chafe him, looking into his face with kindly anxiety, as much to say, "Poor creature, art thou dead?" When at last they perceive some heaving of the lungs, what joy is in the breast of those brethren as they say, "His life is not extinct." It would be a privilege to chafe one hand of that poor man, and so help to restore him. Or suppose another case. A house is in flames, and in it is a woman with her children, who cannot by any means escape. In vain she attempts to come downstairs. The flames prevent her. She has lost all presence of mind and knows not how to act. A strong man comes and says, "Make way! Make way! I must save that woman." And cooled by the genial streams of benevolence, he marches through the fire. Though scorched and almost stiffed, he gropes his way. He ascends one staircase, then another, and though the stairs totter, he places the woman beneath his arm, takes a child on his shoulder, and down he comes, twice a giant, having more might than he ever possessed before. He has jeopardized his life, and perhaps an arm may be disabled, or a limb taken away, or a sense lost, or an injury irretrievably done to his body. Yet he claps his hands and says, "I have saved lives from death."